Sup guys, it's Alex here, and welcome to the January 22nd edition of the Bracketology here for 2021. And man, there were some crazy upsets that have happened over the course of this past week. I mean, Iowa ended up losing to Indiana last night at home by like 12 or something like that, and that meant they lost their spot on the last one seed line, which we had Villanova taking it over. As you can see, Villanova is now up to a 1 seed. We also had Tennessee just get absolutely manhandled by Florida, which was a huge surprise. I mean, I kept expecting the entire time Tennessee to come back. I did not think they were going to lose to Florida. I mean, I think Tennessee was at full strength for that game. And I mean, Florida is missing Keontae Johnson, and I mean, they will be missing Keontae Johnson for the rest of the season. But man, that was just a huge win for Florida. Bad loss for Tennessee. Then, of course, throughout the rest of the bracket, we have Clemson, who got destroyed by Virginia this past weekend. And then I think they also got destroyed this past week. I can't remember who they faced, but they lost by like 12 or 13 or something like that. They were just never able to get back into the game. Then we had Pittsburgh beat Syracuse. Syracuse, I think, is now off of the bracket. We also had Pittsburgh beat Duke. And now Duke, as you are looking through this bracket here, that's actually probably the biggest news out of everything. Duke is now out of the tournament as of right now, which is pretty crazy. Both Kentucky and Duke being out. I mean, Kentucky, everybody knows about it already. This is just an awful season for them. They're like 4-9. They lost on a freaking buzzer beater layup to Georgia when they were up by like 5 in the last minute of the game, which as a Kentucky fan, I'm just talking about sour grapes right there. But either way, I'll go ahead and show you the bubble. Usually we do the bubble after we take a look at the bracket, but today I just want to take a look here at the bubble to show you guys Duke. But on the bubble here, last four buys are Indiana, which I think they should be higher. I don't know if their win over Iowa is factored in there. I mean, that was pretty impressive. Rutgers lost again last night to Penn State. They have now lost, I think, 6 out of their last 7 games. They are trending down. And we have North Carolina and Arkansas. Last four in are Michigan State, Stanford, Utah State, and Richmond. First four out are San Diego State and Maryland, who had a quality win this past week. Don't remember who it was over, but I remember being impressed that they got the win. Then Marquette and Pittsburgh. Then the next four out are Duke. So Duke's not even in the first 4 teams out of the bracket. They are the 5th team out, according to Joe Lunardi. Then Syracuse, Loyola, Chicago, and Providence. So if we go back up here, we'll take a look at the movement in the bracket from Tuesday to now. Up in Region 1, we still have Gonzaga remaining the 1 seed. Creighton down to a 5 after losing at home to Providence. That was a huge win for Providence. And we have Illinois up to a 4, Arkansas down to an 11, Clemson down to a 7. Seton Hall almost had the huge upset win over Villanova this past week. It was like 75-73 or something like that. And Seton Hall had a chance to go win the game, or at least tie it or send it into overtime or something like that. And it was a full court pass, but their center just went through their hands and out of bounds. I felt so bad for Seton Hall. That was a great play, drawn up, great execution, just couldn't catch the ball. Then we have Wisconsin up to a 2. Then over there in Region 2, we still have Baylor remaining the 1 seed with a huge dominant victory over Kansas this week. LSU down to an 8. Missouri up to a 5. Florida State up to a 6. I think they were the ones that ended up beating Clemson. I may be wrong on that, though. But then we have Stanford and Michigan State as the 11 seed playing game. UConn up to a 7. BYU up to a 10. And then Iowa down to a 2, as I mentioned earlier, because they ended up losing to Indiana last night. Region 3, we have Michigan remaining the 1 seed over there. Oklahoma now up to a 9. Rutgers down to an 11. They just keep falling throughout the course of the bracket. I think they had made it up to like a 4 or a 5 at one point, but they are just free falling down after losing 6 of their last 7. Then we have Tennessee down to a 3 after losing to Florida. Then over there in Region 4, we do have Villanova now up to the 1 line, as I've mentioned throughout the course of this video so far. Then we have Louisville down to an 8. I think they ended up getting destroyed by Florida State this week. I don't know. I can't remember who played Clemson. I'm just having a blank in my mind right now. But Florida State had gone on the road and beaten Louisville pretty handily. I think it was about like 12 or 13 points or something like that. That's why Louisville was down to an 8. Then Florida, as I mentioned earlier, they are now up to a 9 because they just dominated Tennessee this past week. Then Minnesota up to a 5 after the huge win over Michigan. Then Richmond and Utah State are the playing game as a 12 there. Then Wofford is new to the field as a 13. Colorado is down to a 6. Texas Tech now up to a 3, and Purdue up to a 7 after having a crazy come-from-behind victory over Ohio State this week. I think they were down by like 11 or 12 with like 5 minutes to go or something, and then somehow came back and ended up winning. So that was pretty impressive by Purdue. They had a freshman named like Ivy or something hit a huge 3 to seal the deal and get the win on the... Actually, I don't remember if it was on the road or not. Don't quote me on that, but it was against Ohio State. I do remember that. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look here at the Bracketology just based off of this new bracket from Joe Lunardi. As you guys know, every bracketology update that I do, I go through the entire bracket, and the way that I do it is I go to Google, type in Excel brackets, and then there's a site called like Vertex 42 or something like that I always use for my brackets. So make sure, if you guys want to do this out, and you have to update the bracket every time there's a new bracketology. It doesn't automatically populate or anything. It just takes like 5 minutes to do. So that's how you get to the bracket there. I know I've been having a lot of questions over these past couple of bracketologies about how I get this bracket here, and that's why, if you're watching this video right now, you get the answer. And if you're still commenting about it, if I see your comment, I'll just say watch the video. So how about that? But then here we go. In Region 1, we are going to have Gonzaga, obviously moving on past the winner of NC and Jacksonville State. Then I think that Cade Cunningham will lead Oklahoma State to a victory over Boise State, though Boise State is looking pretty good, I do have to admit. Just don't think that they could beat Oklahoma State. Then I am going to go with an upset pick here in Winthrop. You guys know, if you've been watching my last few bracketologies, that I do love Winthrop as a Cinderella team, as an at-large sleeper. I think they can get the victory there over Creighton. Creighton just hasn't been looking as good these past couple of weeks, and maybe even months, if you want to say that, as we thought they'd be over the course of the preseason. And then we're going to have Illinois here moving on past Belmont. Then USC, I think, can handle Arkansas there. Arkansas they looked really good at the start of the year. They just haven't been able to keep that momentum going. And we'll have Kansas moving on past Bryant. Then we'll have Clemson moving on past Seton Hall, and then Wisconsin moving on past Cleveland State. So then for a spot in the Sweet 16, if I can freaking pick Wisconsin, there we go. We will have Gonzaga move on past Oklahoma State. Then we're going to have Illinois moving on past Winthrop. Illinois is just another team that I can't figure out if they can beat a quality opponent. They beat a lot of good teams, lose to a lot of bad teams. They're just not very consistent, but everybody recognizes the talent that team does have. Then I'll have Kansas moving on past USC. And then I'm going to go with Wisconsin here, moving on past Clemson. I've been shafting Wisconsin with my picks over these past couple of weeks, but I do think they can make it to the Sweet 16 here. Then we're going to have Gonzaga moving on to the Elite Eight along with Kansas. I do think Kansas and Bill Self will be able to beat Wisconsin here in the Sweet 16. And then for a spot in the Final Four, I am going to have Gonzaga moving on past Kansas. I just don't think anybody except Gonzaga is going to come out of that region. I just can't. I don't picture anybody being able to match Gonzaga and moving on to the Final Four out of Region 1. So over here in Region 2, we will have Baylor moving on past the winner of Southern and Utah Valley. Then we're going to have LSU beat Xavier. Xavier had been undefeated at one point, but I think they've lost like 2 out of their first 4 Big East games. Then we're going to have St. Bonaventure moving on past Missouri as a 12-over-5 upset there. So I have 2 12-over-5 upsets so far. I'm just not sold on Missouri this year. I don't know what it is, but I just can't get sold on that team making a run throughout the course of the tournament, especially whenever they face Kentucky, and I'll have to eat my words because Missouri's going to beat Kentucky, but I don't think they could beat St. Bonaventure here in the tournament. So then we're going to have Ohio State here as the 4 seed moving on past UAB. Florida State, I think, could beat the winner of Stanford, which I spelled Stanford right there, and Michigan State, which I think would be Michigan State, but either way, they're going to fall to Florida State. Then Alabama is just looking fantastic right now. They are making a run throughout the course of the SEC right now. They are looking fantastic. They're going to beat Northeastern. Connecticut, I think, will be able to beat BYU, and then Iowa with Luka Garza will move on past Sam Houston State. Then for a spot in the Sweet 16, we have Baylor moving on past LSU. Ohio State will end St. Bonaventure's hope for a Cinderella run and move on at Sweet 16. Then we're going to have Alabama here moving on past Florida State. This would be a huge matchup in college football, if you want to say like in the early 2010s, because Florida State sucks in football right now. And then we're going to have UConn lose to Iowa here for a spot in the Sweet 16. Then for a spot in the Elite Eight, we will have Baylor moving on past Ohio State. And I am actually going to go with Alabama here moving on past Iowa. Iowa has been struggling big time with their defense, and it finally caught up to them whenever their offense couldn't handle their end of the bargain against Indiana, because Indiana ended up winning by 12 by scoring 81, and Iowa's offense only scored 69. Iowa could win the national championship if they could get their defense to be good, but they just are absolutely awful on defense. And Alabama is a team that just scored over 100 points against LSU. So Alabama could definitely take advantage of that weak defense from Iowa. I think Alabama could pull off the upset. And to have Alabama in the Elite Eight, if you had told me the beginning of the season, I would have called you crazy. But it's just the way it looks right now. Alabama is one of the hottest teams in the nation, and rightfully so. They look fantastic. But then they will fall to Baylor. I'm talking them up a ton there. But, I mean, to make it to the Elite Eight is huge for that program and Nate Oates. But they are going to run into the buzzsaw that is Baylor there. And Baylor's going to move on to the Final Four. Then over here in Region 3, we'll have Michigan moving on past South Dakota. St. Louis, I think, will be Oklahoma. I really want to pick the upset here with Toledo over UCLA, but I just can't bring myself to do that. UCLA, I think, they did struggle with Washington last night, but I think they could beat Toledo. Virginia will beat Siena. I am going to go with an upset here, 11-6 with Rutgers over Oregon. I still believe in Rutgers. I mean, they have the talent. They just haven't been able to win the games, and I mean, it's the Big Ten, and I'm also just not sold on Oregon this year. So I am going to go with Rutgers over Rutgers over Oregon, but I feel dirty about saying it just because Rutgers has been so awful recently. Then we're going to go with Tennessee here, moving on past UC Irvine. Then this matchup's really interesting to me. Virginia Tech had the win over Villanova, Indiana with the win over Iowa. These two teams, I think, would have a fantastic first-round matchup, but I am going to go with Indiana pulling off the 10-7 upset. Then we'll have Texas Tech here, Texas moving on past UMBC. Then for a spot in the Sweet 16, we got Michigan moving on past St. Louis, Virginia moving on past UCLA. We'll have Tennessee moving on past Rutgers, and then Texas moving on past Indiana. Then for a spot in the Elite Eight, we will have Michigan moving on past Virginia. And then I am going to go with Texas here, moving on past Tennessee. I probably would have gone with Tennessee. I think I did go with Tennessee on the Tuesday bracket, but that loss against Florida was pretty eye-opening. And then for a spot in the Final Four, we will go with Michigan over Texas. But then over here in Region 4, we're going to go with Villanova moving on past Montana State. Then I think that Florida will be able to beat Louisville. Louisville I don't know what's going on with that program. I think they've lost either 2 or 3 straight. I know they've lost 2 straight to Miami. And then Florida State, can't remember if they lost before that. And we're going to go with Minnesota here, moving on past Richmond and Utah State, which I think would be Utah State. West Virginia, I think will be able to beat Wofford. Then I'm going to go with North Carolina pulling off the 11-6 over Colorado. Texas Tech will be able to beat Navy. Then Purdue, I really want to go with Drake pulling off the upset here. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go with Drake pulling off the upset. I really think Purdue can make a good run throughout the course of the tournament, but I really just want to go with the Cinderella pick because I don't really have anybody moving on too far here in the bracket, and there's always going to be an upset run throughout the course of the tournament. So why not go with Drake here pulling off the 10-7 over Purdue, and then Houston will be able to beat Texas State. Then first spot in the Sweet 16, we got Villanova moving on past Florida. Minnesota, I think, can beat West Virginia. Texas Tech will move on past North Carolina. And then you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick Drake pulling off the upset over Houston. There's always like a couple, 1 or 2 seeds that fall before they even make it to the Sweet 16 every year. And why not have Drake, who is undefeated at this point in the season, be one of those teams and pull off the 10-2 over Houston. But then first spot in the Elite Eight, we got Minnesota pulling off the upset here. 5-11. Minnesota can beat anybody in the nation if they catch fire, which they showed against Michigan. But they can also lose to anybody because they scored like 37 or not 37. It was like 40-something to Michigan in their first match. But either way, I think that Minnesota can catch fire with Marcus Carr and move on to the Elite Eight by beating the 1 seed Villanova. Then I am going to go with Texas Tech here, moving on past Drake. I think Texas Tech will be able to get that victory and end Drake's Cinderella run, which is nothing to be ashamed of because they beat the number 2 seed Houston. But then for a spot in the Final Four, Minnesota and Texas Tech, I am going to go with Texas Tech and Chris Beard. Got that huge road win over Texas. Looked pretty good against Baylor. I know they did end up falling, but we're going to have Texas Tech here moving on to the Final Four as a 3 seed. Then for a spot in the national championship game, we're going to go with Gonzaga, and then we're also going to go with Baylor. I mean, these 2 teams are just the class of college basketball right now. Can't picture anybody but these 2 teams making the national championship game at this point. And then Gonzaga versus Baylor, we are going to have Baylor win the championship. I can't remember who I picked on Tuesday, but Baylor has looked pretty good recently. They beat Texas Tech. I think they already I think they play Texas in the coming weeks, but then they also beat Kansas this past week. So Baylor getting these quality wins, staying undefeated. I think they win the national championship. So there we have it. Oh, I forgot to do a food item. If you're still watching at this point in the video, it's like almost 14 minutes in. Let's go, oh gosh, what do we want to go with? Let's just go with sushi. How about that? I don't know if you guys like sushi, but the food item of this video will be sushi. So comment sushi below if you're still watching at this point in the video. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your own predictions for the bracketology in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and I will see you all later.